Okay, hello and welcome to the first part of our To-Do app tutorial. First thing that I want to do is go ahead and talk about the two technologies that we're going to be using in this tutorial, which are Go, or Golang, the Go language, and React. So the benefits of React. Unlike a monolithic application, when you use React, it compiles down to static content. That's just HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So your entire user interface is completely static. There's no server-side logic being put into it. And that also means that there's going to be no page refreshing throughout the UI. So when you click on a link to see a specific post or a specific user's page, it doesn't need to refresh the whole page, and it's much faster and more visually appealing to the user. Benefits of Go. So Go is going to generate very lightweight static binaries. It's all statically linked. It doesn't require a runtime because it's a compiled language. It's very type safe. If you haven't used Go before, it has this really cool interface implementation where interfaces are actually implicit instead of explicit. You can Google that, but I'll cover that later. And then the HTTP server on it is going to be very fast compared to something like Node.js. And they both work together very well. They're both easily going to be Dockerized because they generate such small files and don't depend on much else. They fit very well into a sort of microservices architecture by that same trade. So yeah, that is my little presentation on the technologies we're going to be using. So let's dive into creating our application. I'm just going to pop in the terminal here. I'm going to go to my projects, going to go to tutorials, and I'm going to create a new tutorial called To-Do app tut. And I'm going to go in here. And I know that this app is going to have a front end and a back end. I'm going to go ahead and just create the back end as an empty directory. And then I'll do CRA for the front end. So npx create React app. And I want TypeScript in this. You don't have to use TypeScript, but I like to. So I'm going to do -- template TypeScript. And I'm going to call it front end. Okay, that has generated our front end directory. This episode is going to focus all on the front end and really just the first part of it. The reason that I am doing the front end first is because it's a sort of kind of test-driven development almost, because you use the front end to specify what your back end does, right? So in this episode, we are just going to be creating a simple front end that displays a list of posts, and those posts are just going to be held in memory. So what that tells us is that our backend needs to have some function where we can get a list of all of our posts and then display that on the front end. So that's why we do the front end first, typically, if we're working on both the front end and the back end at the same time. So I'll just open this up in VS Code. Okay, and then once in VS Code, the first thing to do is to, first of all, before we do anything else, I want to install one more dependency. I'm using yarn, but if you're using npm, that's npm install. I'm going to do yarn add node sass. This is going to let us use the Sass preprocessor in React instead of just vanilla CSS, which I like a lot better. Okay, next step is to get rid of all this ugly boilerplate. If I start this right now, it's going to have all this ugly create React. Well, it's not ugly, but it's not our project. It's going to have this create React app boilerplate in here. We don't want any of this. We want a blank slate. So the first thing to do is to go into our app.tsx and delete everything inside this div with the class name of app. We don't want anything in there. Now logo doesn't do anything, so we can delete that. We can delete our logo.svg. We can go into our index.css, no, I'm sorry, our app.css, and delete the entire thing. We'll go into our index.css now, I suppose. And we want to style not just the body, but everything with a margin of 0, a padding of 0, a font family of... I'm a big fan of Open Sans, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and pull that from Google Fonts. You can just go ahead and search Google Fonts in the browser. You should come here to fonts.google.com. And then Open Sans is usually one of the top results without searching for it, but if for some reason it isn't there, you can use the search bar. So Open Sans, we want to click on this regular 400, so select this style. And I like the import syntax because I can just paste it right into my CSS and I don't have to mess with the HTML. So within our index.css, we'll just go ahead and paste that in. Now our font family can be just Open Sans, Helvetica, I suppose. That doesn't need to be in quotes, does it? Virgil Helvetica. Sure. Thank you, VS Code. It should have a comma. And we're not going to have any code tags in our front end, so we'll just delete that. Other files here. Okay, app.test.tsx. We don't really need to test anything right now. We certainly don't need to test this because this just tests that there's a link on the screen that says Learn React, so we don't need that at all. We'll leave the boilerplate though in case we want to do some testing later. This just reminds us exactly how it works. Okay, index.tsx looks good to me. Alright, I think that's it. If we go into our browser here, our React app, I'll just push this to the side here so that we can view these sort of both at the same time. Okay, and I don't really need to look at this right now. First things first, we want our app to have a nice header at the top. That's where I always like to start because it gives you what's really going to be the frame for your web page. And of course, we are doing this mobile first. That's why I have it in a sort of portrait aspect ratio here on the right. So for a header, we'll just make that a separate component. So we're going to make a folder called components. And in here, we'll create a file called header.tsx. And header.tsx is going to export a constant variable called header, which is an arrow function. And this is going to be a React functional component. We're going to return some JSX here, a header with the class name of page header. And in here, we'll do an h1 and call it to do app is what it's going to say. So save that. And nothing is going to appear over here, obviously, because we haven't pulled it into our app component. So we'll go into our app component and right inside our div here, header, and it'll auto import that for us. Ta-da! Now that doesn't really look like a page header, does it? It just looks like some text. So the next thing we're going to do is add some styles to it. Header.scss. And we have to import that in order for it to affect anything. ./header.scss. All right. So first thing we want to select is that page header component. And we'll give it a height of 5.6 rem. I'm going to be using the rem unit a lot in CSS because I find that it's much better precision than pixels. Pixels are usually way too precise for anything that you need. And then also, rem is actually modifiable. If you select HTML and you change the font size, that will actually change how many pixels one rem equals. By default, it's 16 pixels, but if I were to change it to, say, 18 pixels, everywhere in my CSS where I've referenced rem, it's going to change that value. So it's pretty neat. I like to use that on tablet sizes. It just makes everything look a little more zoomed in if you just up the what one rem equals. If, of course, you've been using rem all throughout your CSS already. Okay, so height of 6 rem, display flex, align item center so that it's vertically centered, and we'll give it a background of, I want to pick a nice blue here. VS Codes can let us do a color picker. I like that. It's maybe a little bit dim. That's better. Okay, and we'll change the text color in here to white. All right. Add a little bit of padding. We don't need any padding on the top and bottom because we've already vertically centered everything, but we will add some on the left and right so that our text isn't squished up all the way to the left. 1 rem is probably not enough, so I'll do 2. Perfect. I like the way that looks. Great. We've got our header in here. Sorry, I'm fussy about this color. I want it to be a little bit on the darker side. A little bit more vivid. Yeah, that's better. Okay. Woo! Great, we've got our header in here. Next thing that we want to do is create another component, and this is going to be our post list component. I'm sorry, not posts, items, to-do items. So we'll call it TodoList.tsx. And this is going to export another React functional component. And it's going to take in a list of to-dos. And we're going to be good programmers here and define our prop types, not inline in its own little type declaration. To-dos. It's going to be an array of to-do. We don't need a semicolon there. So this to-do is undefined. We have to actually sort of define what that data structure means, or what it is. So in our SRC here, I'm going to create a folder called entities, and in there I'll put a todo.ts, and we're just going to export type to-do equals. What does this to-do need to have? What property should it have? I'm thinking a title, which is a string, of course, a description, another string. It needs to know whether it's incompleted, whether it is completed, Boolean. I think that is sufficient information for now. Later we might add some time and date data, when the to-do was created, when it was completed, things like that. But for now, we'll just keep it really simple. And then this we should be able to auto import. Perfect. And now we need to make sure that this is a React functional component of type props. Great. And now we have gotten rid of this red underline here. Why is this underlined now? Oh, it is a React functional component, so it needs to return some JSX. It's going to return an unordered list with a class name of TodoList. And then we're just going to go ahead and loop through all of our to-dos. I'm sorry, that should be a map. To and we will return, just for now, we'll just do a paragraph that has the to-do title. Oh, I'm sorry, this should be wrapped in curly braces so that it knows. Oh, I'm sorry, these should be list elements, shouldn't they? And React is going to get mad if they don't have a key property. So I will grab the index there as well and give them all a key of that index. Great, now we can pull this into our app component. To-do list, to-dos equals title. Oh, I want to make also the description optional. Great, and we won't give these dummy to-dos any description yet. Title, do dishes. Is completed. True, we already did the dishes. Oh, and we have to close this to-do list tag. And interestingly, we're not seeing anything up there. That's strange. It should show something. Title, mow the lawn is completed. False, we haven't done that one yet. Let's get out our inspector here. And it would help if we actually returned this list item instead of just declaring it and not doing anything with it. So we just want to change those. We just want to go ahead and change these to parentheses. And voila. Great, we've got some bare list items there. Next thing that we want to do is create some kind of to-do component that we can pass all this data to, and then the to-do component is going to handle all of the formatting and the HTML and CSS for each individual to-do. We don't want to leave that all up to the to-do list component. So we'll go into, we'll make a file called todo.tsx and export a React functional component. And this is going to take some properties as well. It's actually just going to take properties of, this needs to have a different name than our entities to do. So what we're actually going to call it is TodoItem, because we don't want those names to conflict. Okay, and this is going to be a React functional component of type todo. So we can get in our title, our description, and our is completed. Okay, great. Now this needs to return some JSX. A to-do item is going to be, we want to use as much semantic HTML5 as possible. So we're not just going to return a div here. I think probably an article is most appropriate. If you read the spec on it, it says that an article is anything really that's self-contained. So that would be a to-do item fits that description pretty well, I think, because it's not just a section of something else. It is its own self-contained box of content. So we'll give that a class name of to-do item. Okay, and within this we'll put an H3 with the title, a paragraph with the description, checkbox, and default checked is equal to is completed. Great, we've got our TodoItem component here. We'll go back to our to-do list and replace this little to-do title thing with a to-do item. Title, to-do.type. Whoa, I don't know why it completed that for me. To-do.title, description, to-do description, and is completed, to-do.is completed. Let's spread this out a little bit. Okay, I like how that looks. Perfect, now we've got this H3 here with our to-do titles on it, and a little checkbox. So, what do we want next? We want to style these because they look terrible. And did I spell dishes wrong? There's the font just being strange. That's an I, a lowercase I. Oh, okay. First, we're going to style our to-do item. I'm sorry, our to-do list. So we'll grab our to-do list class, and we'll give it some padding, because that is looking like what these things need right now. They need some space around them. So padding, we'll give it padding of 1 rem, and we actually need to import this. So import /to-do list .scss. Okay, now we've got some padding in here, and oh, we've got bullet points. I don't know if you guys can see those, but those are not supposed to be there. So what we also need to do is give this a list style, since it's an unordered list, of none, and that will get rid of any bullet points. Perfect. Now our to-do items themselves are also going to have some styling on them, probably more styling than the to-do list. So we'll grab our to-do item and give it also a padding of 1 rem. And we of course need to pull that in as well. Okay, perfect. These have some space around them now. That is excellent. I want to see how this looks if we give one of them a description, so I'll go back and do that. Oops. Delete that. App.tsx. I'll just make a third. No, I'll put one in the middle here. So title, homework, description, history project. So it's a specific kind of homework, and I did not spell homework right. Is completed. False. We're not doing our homework. Okay, so that is how it looks. So what I think I want here is I want this checkbox to be on the right side. I want it to float over on the right side, but I want the title and the description to stay like this. I want the title above the description so that it has this nice sort of this look to it. Okay. So the way that we're going to do that is we have to go into our to-do item, and we need to wrap this H3 in this paragraph in some other tag. So we'll give it a section tag with the class name of to-do item text, because those are both text things, so I guess that makes sense. Oh, and if my keyboard shortcuts are freaking you out, it's because I'm using the Vim emulator in VS Code, which looks much different. That's why I've got this block cursor here. I'm doing all sorts of weird operations. You don't need it. It's just, I like it. Okay. So, neat thing about SCSS is we can, or SAS, is we can nest our selectors. So if we want to get everything inside a to-do item selected by something, for example, to-do item text, which we could select this outside of the to-do item and it would do the same thing, but I like how this looks in the CSS. So to-do item text, we don't even need to select that right now. What am I doing? All we need to do is change this to display flex and then justify content space between. Okay, perfect. What I would also like is a different background color on here. So I don't know if I want the to-do items to have a dark background color or if I want the entire page to have a dark background color. I like dark themes in general, so I'm going to make the entire page have a dark background color. So in our index.css, we'll just grab our body tag and we'll give it a background color of some really dark gray, I think. Yeah, okay. Then we'll go into our to-do item and we'll give this a background color of a slightly lighter gray. Maybe even a little bit lighter. Oh, sorry, that would be darker, wouldn't it? Okay, and we'll make the color, the text color white. And we'll give this some margin on the bottom of 1 rem. And then we'll give it a border radius of about 5 pixels. Okay, that is looking pretty good to me. Now the thing you'll notice is that these checkboxes are not centered vertically. We can easily do that with the align items property. Great. And I'm not a big fan of this padding here. I think there should be more padding like everywhere. I'm going to go up to 1.5 here and 1.5 here. Oops. And 1.5 here. Boy, I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, so there's nothing that we can really do about these checkboxes right now the way they look. What we're going to have to do is introduce some custom checkboxes, which is a whole other thing. It's like you sort of use a button, or you use a checkbox and you hide the checkbox and introduce your own custom styled element. And that is a project for a later date. But this is looking like a pretty good start. So yeah, we've got this all set up for mobile. I believe that will conclude the first episode. All right, thank you.